by the way, please. Are you ready?
Now you look like Jessie's hat. Or cowgirl hat.
Morning everyone, welcome to the lesson. We're going to get started very soon, we'll just give everyone a minute to turn up.
$51 viewers. 54 viewers.
Someone new. Whole life is beautiful. You were the light for me to find my truth. I just want to say thank you. Leaving to find my soul. Told her I had to go. And I know it ain't pretty when our hearts get broke. Too young to feel this old.
Alexa, stop. Sorry if I just started yours all off there, all you Alexas. Right, okay, welcome to the first Key Stage 2 lockdown lesson. Just before we start, I just want to message to the parents out there, this has been harder than I imagined in terms of this week off, and I'm a teacher, so it must be extremely difficult. I understand everything you try, some might work, some might not work, but please don't give up. The worst thing you can possibly do is to just sit there and do nothing and just hope everything's going to sort itself out. The more you can do with your kids, the better, but at the same time, you've got to keep them happy, you've got to keep yourself sane, so just do what works. If this works for you, these lessons, brilliant. If they don't, try something else. It's entirely up to you, but the fact you're trying is amazing. And kids, a message for all of you, go easy on your parents, yeah? Okay, they have the best interest in you, they love you very much, and they are trying to help you. Even though you might just want to sit around and do nothing, believe me, you will get bored of that very soon. So do the work, it will really help you when all this calms down and when we get back to school. Okay, right, so this is a Key Stage 2 lesson, it's about understanding fractions. It might be a bit too easy for some people, some bits might be a bit too hard for others. We're trying the best we can to get something that's going to work for everyone. Okay, we're going to start with a little game, then we're going to do some fraction work, a bit of practical tasks. While we're doing the first game, I'll give you instructions if you haven't made your little strips of paper yet. And then at the end we are going to play a game of bingo, and just to warn you, I get extremely excited when we play bingo. Okay, so the first game we are going to play is something I call product, difference, sum. Okay, now it'd be interesting to know if you know what those terms actually mean. So we're going to see what you can do, and I want your children to type their answers in the chat. If you can put your first name down as well, so I know who's got the right answers, that'd be fantastic. So you need to work out the product, difference and sum in that order of these two numbers, of 3 and 5. So as soon as you know those answers, type them in the chat with your name, please. I will explain what those terms mean in a bit, but those are terms that you should understand what they are. You should have been taught that by now. You should know those, and loads forget it when they get into high school. So get working out and get typing away. Don't shout out any answers here, please. Okay?
in the sum. I just saw something not in the sum.
Okay, brilliant answers. Right, fantastic. I've got to say, big up to Lucy there, was the fastest person on there with the answers. So, just to go through this, the product is a word which we don't use enough. The product means when you multiply the two numbers together. So, if you didn't know that, let's try and remember that from now on. Product, multiply them together. So, 3 times 5 is going to give you 15 for your product. The difference is the gap between the two numbers. A simple way to work out the difference, and it always works, it means the same things, is to subtract the smaller number from the bigger number. So for the difference you could do 5 take away 3 to give you 2. And the sum is the one you all know, you add them together. But often we say sums and we don't mean sums, we mean products or we mean the difference. A sum does not mean something you do with numbers, it means adding them together. So the sum, 3 and 5, is 8. So well done for those answers, and well done for Lucy, that was extremely fast. So just to get us warmed up, we're going to have a few questions like that, the same thing, before we move on to fractions. A few of you in there saying, I've never done fractions, I don't like fractions. We are going to teach in a new way, it's going to be easy, it's going to be simple, and it's a way that can be carried all the way through to high school and to GCSE. Okay, so we're going to do some product, different sums. Let's see if you can get these answers right. You don't need to post these on the message. Write them down yourself on your piece of paper or anything like that, and see how you get on. Okay, there they are. So, product, different sum of those 6 questions there. Put a few tricky ones in at the end as well. The last 2, very tough. If you can't do all of these, that's fine. Those of you in year 6, hopefully you can have a good go at those 2 there. And if any parents are there whilst your children are there, if you haven't got these strips of paper, you really need these for the main activity we're going to be doing in a bit. So try and get hold of an A4 piece of paper and just cut them into some strips. If you haven't got A4, it doesn't matter. This is a nice size to work with, but you know, bigger or smaller is fine. So try and get a few of those ready. You'll need about 6, I think. Okay, so good luck with those. Any problems, let me know. Get that in your book there, that one, because so you can keep your answers. Don't look them out, because, oh, okay, you did in the book. You put title.
Maths. On it.
Okay, so we'll start with 2 and 6.
2 and 6. How should I put it in the right one?
If you do product first, then difference, then sum, do them in that order, yeah?
This is getting hard.
Okay, if some of you have not really multiplied before, that's absolutely fine. Just do the ones you can. So if you want to go down the list and just work out the sum of each one, so that's just adding together 2 and 6, and just write down the sums, okay? Do what you can do at the moment. I know some of you will be able to do this really easily, some of you will find it very challenging. Okay, particularly if you're only in years kind of 2 or 3 or even 4, these can be quite tough. So if you need to, just work out the sum of each one, that is adding together. Maybe you can then do the difference, which is where you take them away. The product is multiplying together. Maybe you can do some and you can't do others. That's absolutely fine. It's about doing some maths, pushing yourself, but at the same time, just doing what you can do.
Daddy, I've just got a question.
Yeah.
So I've got a feeling that if I multiply negative
Don't do that one first. Do the other ones first. What do you think it would be?
I think I'll actually be dividing adding it because if I
No, you multiply, but it'll be negative. I'm not going to tell you the answer, but just do the 5 and 10 first. Go through in order.
Oh. Sunday. Okay. Eight. Oh my gosh. I can't count in 6, it's always okay then. 16. 52. 9.
Right, okay, just a warm up. Don't worry if you haven't finished all those. If you have, fantastic, okay? As I've kind of tried to say, there's a big range of ages here. So they start with easy ones, go on to harder ones. You don't need to start on number 1 if you think, you know what, I can do 12 times 16. I'm going to go and do that, okay? But don't worry if you can't, okay? I'm trying to put a range of questions on there. So I'll put the answer on the board so you can check how you've done. So there they are there. So 2 and 6, we had a product of 12. So 2 times 6 is 12. A difference of 4 and a sum of 8. We have 50, 5 and 15 for the next one. 48, 2 and 14. 32, 14 and 18. 192. Very tough, that one. I would use a grid method if you've used that. I'm not going to go through that now. But that's the kind of thing you might get at the end of year 6 on a SATs paper, on a very tough question there. 4 and 28, and for negatives, real challenge this one. You are not expected to multiply negatives together yet, but I thought I'd put it in as a challenge, and we might have a few year 7s here as well. So negative 6, 5 is the difference between -2 and 3, and 1 is the sum when you add them together. Okay, so hopefully we are all warmed up now. We are going to look at our fraction work. So, you want to get one of those strips of paper.
Oh yeah, I know what we're doing. We're doing the sweets, aren't we? Sweeties.
Okay, so you've got your strip of paper, and this is a fantastic way to represent a fraction by thinking of this as a whole one. Okay, you can almost imagine this is a sweet, one of those strip sweet things you get. So what I want you to do is to fold this piece of paper so you have 2 halves there. And I want you to explain, if you're with an adult there, if you can explain to them how you know each part is exactly a half. Okay, so can we fold this into 2 halves, please? And if you know how to write a half down, you can write a half with your pen or pencil on each side. Write a half down on your strip of paper. Very good. So, hopefully you've folded it in half. You all know what that means. In half like that, we've folded it in half, and we know they're both halves because both parts need to be equal in fractions. It's about splitting into equal parts. So you hopefully folded it about down there, down the middle. Okay? So it rubs off the, I've checked it, don't worry. So what we can do is we can call this side a half, which is how we write fractions, and this side a half. And say that you're going to use that later. So you know a half is exactly that size of your piece of paper. Now, fractions are really important. They've been around for a long, long time. Some of the first evidence of fractions was actually the Egyptians. Okay, now I'm sure you've heard of the Egyptians. They write using hieroglyphics, and this was their version for fractions. They would put an I on the top of their numbers, and then they put their normal numbers underneath. So for 1 to 5, they use kind of sticks. So this would be a half in Egyptian. So if you see that Egyptian hieroglyphic anywhere, they're talking about a half. Obviously, if they were going out hunting and catching, I don't know what Egyptians ate, let's say camels, if they do, probably wrong with that, sounds ridiculous. They would need to share that camel between 2 people, so they'd need a number. They need to split one up, so they split it into 2 halves, like that. So so that's just a bit of history about where fractions came from. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to make some more fractions. So save this strip of paper. This is your half fraction there, and we're going to make it some new fractions. And imagining that this represents a sweet. I'll show you what I mean by the sweet. Okay, so imagine your strip of paper is a whole sweet, and we are sharing it between people fairly. Fairly meaning each part is equal. So can you take each of your strips of paper and fold them into the different fractions based on who we are sharing them out between?
Okay.
So the first one we've done, so the first one you've got your 2 people, shared them out, you've got a half written on each side. The next one, how would you share a strip of paper between 4 people? Please use a new strip of paper for each fraction.
Okay.
So we're going to have a collection of these. So you've got your half strip, you're going to have your quarter strip, and so on. So you should have 6 strips of paper nicely labelled with your fractions on. And you're going to see how amazing these are to answer questions in a bit. Any questions, please just post it on the chat. Use that to make a quarter, can't you? Because I've already done a half for you.
Yep. So, that's my half. Is that my quarter?
Mm-hmm.
So, is that my quarter? But it's just a half.
Those of you wanting new hats, the better work we do, the more hats you get. Okay, write them on, write them on.
Yeah. Okay. So, see what I get. Four.
If you have finished this already, I want you to discuss with the person that's with you, which ones were the easiest to do? Did you have any really good strategies for getting, say, 4 people and 8 people? Because I think they look quite tricky, those, but there's some nice, easy ways to do it.
Okay.
That would really help you understand how fractions will compare with each other. Okay, think about what the hardest ones were and how you tried to get them accurately. Which ones were easy to do than others? Okay, and keep following, make sure we label on our fractions as well. That's going to be really useful later on. So you're writing on a half and a half, a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, and a quarter.
Oh, Daddy, I keep trying to make a quarter, I keep getting 5.
Fold it in half first. How do we find a quarter or something?
I was making, I folded it in
That's
half.
6 there, dear. That's good.
Oh, I can keep 6.
Yes. Fold it in half first, yeah.
I did.
And what if we fold it in half again?
Yeah. Oh, only one time. Look, that's it. What? Oh my gosh.
Just going to show you what I mean with a quarter. Okay, this is quite an important one. So to find a quarter, if we find half first, that's a half, 2 halves, and then if we fold that in half, we get our quarter, because a quarter is half the size of a half. So if you fold it in half twice, you end up with 4 perfect quarters. Okay, you can do the same kind of thing for 8s as well. Think about it, you've got 4 equal parts here. If you fold those back up, think about how we can get 8s from quarters there. Okay, just another 2 minutes on this, try and get them out, and please make sure you're writing them on. I'll show you what I mean by writing on. So, if you've got this one split into quarters, let's make sure we are writing a quarter on each part of your strip. Okay, that's going to be so useful later on for these extra questions we're going to be doing once we've sorted out what fractions are.
Okay, let's go for 3 people.
And if you want to do it in your books as well, you don't need to fold this, you can draw them in strips like this. Okay? I believe me, this is going to get much more challenging for some of you. Okay, so don't worry, this, if you understand fractions already, fantastic.
Okay, you'll come some more winners.
What's that one for?
I think I've made it.
Oh, no, that's fine, yep, see, yep, okay.
Okay, yes.
Oh, it's too many, I think. So you've got your quarters,
Yeah.
and then you fold that in half just once.
Okay.
Okay, and now you've got 8 pieces there.
I think I need a few more paper.
Right, okay, we're going to move on with some questions. The ones you've done are great, you can make some more if you need them later on. But if you've done the first few, that's going to help you out with most of the first questions. So, just to show you some answers. Okay, those are the kind of splits you should have there. So you've got your fractions, so this is your halves. So you'd have your halves written on there. You'd have your quarters written on there. And so on all the way down. In terms of difficult ones too, I think thirds are quite tricky to get right. Okay, you're going to kind of just estimate and just get them as close as you can. You don't need to do it perfectly, it just needs to be approximate. 6, I think, is very difficult as well. Maybe you started by putting it in half and then split it into 3. It's a good technique. And fifths, a few of you saying, how do you do 5s? There's no real way to do fifths really. You've just got to try and just keep messing around until you get it right there. So some of these are very difficult to do, particularly when you're folding. Okay? Right, so we're going to look at how we can use this now, the kind of questions you'll be asked. So one great way is to compare fractions. So if we said, which is bigger, a quarter or a third, you might think a quarter is bigger because I've got a 4 on the bottom and 4 is bigger than 3. But if we actually look at this, 1/4 here is that section, so that's a quarter, and a third is that section there. So you can clearly see from using your bars that 1/3 is definitely bigger than 1/4. quarter. This is why it's really important that your bars are the same length. This is a great way to explain this in an exam, in a question, to say, I'm proving to you that I know that 1/3 is definitely bigger than a quarter. There are some other ways you might know to do this, which is great. Okay, you are free to use whatever you want. But what I want to do for the next bit is to compare these using some very special symbols called inequalities. So we've got this one here, we've got this one, and we've got equals. Okay? Now, if you imagine this is a crocodile, the crocodile wants to eat the biggest number because it's greedy. It's a greedy crocodile. So in between here we are going to put one of these symbols. So we know that 1/3 is the biggest number because we've shown that. So our crocodile is going to eat the big number because it's a greedy crocodile. So there we go. So I'm going to give you some of those to do. Use your bars to help you, and can you work out which is bigger and which is smaller? If you're not happy using these symbols yet, okay, that's fine. It's all about fractions today. You can just circle the biggest fraction. If they're the same, you can circle both of them. So it's up to you. Either circle the biggest fraction, or you can use these inequalities. It's up to you what you want to do.
Daddy.
Right, so here we go. So can we have a go at these? I will just try and wipe my board.
4.
Okay, the superstar questions there, those are really for your year 6s or even year 7s. If you've got any from high school here, those are tough questions. You might not be able to use bars for that, but these ones, use your bars to help you. Okay?
Daddy.
So say which one is bigger out of each one. So the first question, which is bigger, 1/3 or 1/2? You can say which is the biggest fraction out of those two. Okay, so use your bars. Get your third one. Get your third bar.
I haven't got a 3rd. I've not got a 3rd. I've only got a 1/2.
Okay, let's make you a third one.
I've got 5th, quarters, 6th, 1/2 and 8th. That's what I've got.
Okay, well here's your third ones now.
Okay, 3rd. Daddy, on my 1/2 and I had a little bit of
Okay,
trouble.
so look at that and now say which is bigger, 1/3 or 1/2. Look at your fractions. Which is bigger, 1/3 or 1/2?
Ooh. Definitely a 1/2.
Definitely 1/2 actually on that side, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
So definitely 1/2. So you know for the first one,
Yeah.
you can write in. So we've got 1/3 and 1/2. So what symbol are we going to put to say which one's bigger? Crocodile eats the biggest number.
Yeah. Mr.
Which one's
Greedy.
bigger? You just said 1/2's bigger, didn't you? Okay. Okay, try the next one.
Okay. What's next? A 6 and a 1/2. 1/6 and 1/2.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I've got a 1/2 and a 6. Definitely a 1/2. Definitely.
Okay, any problems at all, please let me know. Please use your bars as well. The bars are the key to understanding this, to making it much easier.
1/2. 1/6. What? Daddy? Daddy? Daddy?
That's it.
I've got all the pens up. I don't know how I got all of them.
Let's just do this. Okay, you know what you're doing, yeah?
Yeah.
So which is bigger, 1/2 or 6?
Oh, how do I keep doing that?
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you circle the bigger one first and then put the symbol in afterwards, yeah?
Okay.
If you're getting confused with these symbols, circle the biggest one first and you can try and put those in at the end. Okay, so just circle the biggest fraction. This is about fractions. I'm just trying to give you some extra stuff
2/5
if you're comfortable
and
working
3
out that level.
quarters. 2/5 and 3/4. I've got a 5th. That's good.
But you think about 2 of those, don't you?
Yeah. So, got my 5th. So my quarters, I have got quarters and 3/4. So let's see. Can I go up? Yep. Okay,
Okay.
just read on. The 2/4 and 1/2. Ooh, I've got a feeling that 1/2 will be. I think this is going to be the same.
That diagram on the board, I'll just show you again, that might help you to answer question C there. That's the kind of comparison I would do with those two bars there. Okay, it shows you really clearly which one is biggest out of that.
Okay, a 1/4 and the 1/2. 1/2. I've got this. Equal. 1/2. 1. Half is equal to 2/4. Daddy, I've just found one that's equal. One that's equal.
Oh, very good, very good.
4 and 5. 4/4 or 8. Have I got an 8? I should have an 8 somewhere. Yep, got my 8. Okay. And then 4/5. My 5ths, where are the 5ths? There's my 5ths. It's on my board. Okay. So what is it? 4/5.
If anyone's done the superstar questions, okay, those ones there, please post your ideas about how you decided which one was the biggest in those ones. I think those are really tough questions there. So just let me know, just send a message, just how you knew which ones were bigger, what you did. Really interested to see that there.
Daddy, can you?
Okay, right, I'm just going to try and explain this a bit more because a few of you are getting a bit stuck with this. Some of you finished as well, and I know fractions are a very difficult topic. Okay, so let's just look at the first one there. So you should have your 2 bars. You should have your third bar split into thirds, and you should also have your half bar split into halves. Okay, so you've probably got this labelled on 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/2, 1/2. Okay, so you're trying to say what is bigger? 1/3, which is one of those there, that's a third, isn't it? Just get a different colour of pen. So what's bigger, 1/3 or 1/2? So we know a third is smaller than a half just by looking at the size of it. So for question A, you would circle the one that says 1/2 because 1/2 is a bigger fraction. So you're trying to just tell me which one is bigger, or maybe some of them are the same as well. So there's a few tricky ones in there where they might be the same. Okay, please, if you've got a problem with the work, please, someone's already messaged us saying I've got a problem. I'm trying to reply to you as well, so please let me know. And if you've finished and you've not done those ones, please post how you've done that, because I think those are very, very difficult questions.
Somebody said help me on D.
Okay, yep. You said help me on the problem.
Daddy, somebody's done the superstar question.
Right, okay, I'm just going to go through one more, then give you some answers. I'm going to look at the 2/4 and 1/2 one. So, 2/4, we've got this one split into quarters first of all. So when I do quarters, I always split it into half first. And then again, so I know those are all quarters. And then I'm going to get my other bar for halves. So this is split into half. Okay, so looking at those there, if I want 2/4, which is that much, or if I want 1/2, which is the biggest out of those two? Well, you should see they are both exactly the same. So if you were stuck on that one, maybe it's you're thinking which one's bigger. They are the same on that one. So 1/4, 1/2 is equal to 2/4. The bars show that for you there. Okay, now, as I said, there's a big range of questions on this. So brilliant people that are getting those right, but they could be in a completely different year too. They could be in year 6 or year 7. So if you're managing just some of these, if you've managed to do just 1 or 2 of those, that's absolutely brilliant, particularly if you've not even done fractions before. That is outstanding work. So don't feel that because I'm trying to teach for so many different people that you need to do all the questions on the board there. It's not like that. I talked about doing little bits that you can. Okay? Right.